This is section 4.7, part 1, where we're going to look at solving a quadratic equation by finding the square roots. So we've got our quadratic equation in number 1. We see x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 25. And the first thing we're going to want to do is take a look at this trinomial here, and we want to see if we can factor it. So we did some factoring earlier in chapter 4. And what I'm going to point out is, I'll keep red, we've got two perfect squares here. We've got an x squared, which is a perfect square, and 16, which is a perfect square. So that looks like a perfect square trinomial, which we learned how to factor earlier in this chapter. So I'll remind you the formula for the perfect square trinomial. It's a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, which is equal to a minus b squared. This is the factored form. Or you might have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, which is factored to a plus b squared. Which one do we have? Well, since there's a minus here in the second term, looks like we're going to go with this guy. So if I wanted to factor this, I could come along and say, oh, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of that other perfect square, square root of 16, is 4. X squared is in the spot of a squared, so x equals my a. 16 is in the spot of b squared, so square root of 16 is 4, so 4 must be my b. So I just want to plug in a and b into these spots, so I'm going to have x minus 4 squared. So my answer is x minus 4 squared, and that's equal to 25. Right, so this highlighted piece in yellow is the exact same thing as this highlighted piece. It's just factored. Now that I factored it, I've got a nice square here. So I want to take the square root of both sides. So the square root of the quantity x minus 4 squared just cancels that square, and I'm left with x minus 4. And the square root of 25 is plus or minus 5. So the last piece will be to add over my 4. And I've got x equals positive 5 plus 4 gives me 9. And negative 5 plus 4 gives me negative 1. So it looks like I have two answers here of x equals 9 and x equals negative 1. Before we do finish, if you don't like factoring using the perfect square trinomial, remember you can, and I'll do this in gray, this is another color, this is a second option to get to this, it's a second option to get to this spot right here. So I'm going to come back with this same problem of x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals 25. And I can find the factors of 16 that add up to negative 8. And remember, they're both going to be negative because we have to multiply two numbers together to get a positive, add them together to get a negative. So I'd either have negative 1 and negative 16, negative 2 and 8, or negative 4 and negative 4. When I add these together, I get negative 17, which is not negative 8. I could add these together and get negative 10, which is not negative 8. But if I add these two together, I get negative 8, which is what I want. So my answer would be x minus 4 times x minus 4 equals 25. And when I have the same binomial twice, I can write it as x minus 4 squared equals 25. And that gets us right to this point, and you can then continue on just as we did. So it's up to you to decide how you want to get here. All right, if you have a perfect square trinomial, you can do option A, or you could go with option B. Alright, but then once you get here, it's going to be the same. Square root both sides. X minus 4 equals plus or minus 5. Remember, always put in that plus or minus. And then add over the 4. So positive 5 plus 4 is 9. Negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. Boom. There's your final answer.